Welcome. Today, we're going to journey deep into the human psyche, guided by the profound wisdom of Carl Jung. We'll explore a powerful, often hidden force that shapes our lives, the wounded mother. We'll uncover how her unaddressed pain can impact the inner child within you, influencing your choices, your relationships, and your very sense of self. But more importantly, we'll discover how to overcome these deep seated patterns, paving the way for a life of genuine freedom and wholeness. To truly grasp the concept of the wounded mother, we first need to understand Jung's idea of the mother archetype. Think of archetypes as universal, primal patterns etched into our shared human consciousness, a kind of inherited psychological blueprint. The mother archetype is one of the most fundamental. It embodies everything we associate with nurturing, support, boundless love, security, and creation itself. But like all archetypes, the mother also has a shadow side. This shadow can manifest as qualities of devouring, suffocating, abandoning, or neglecting. Now, here's where it gets crucial. The wounded mother isn't necessarily a woman who intentionally sets out to harm her child. Instead, it's a personal mother who, due to her own unintegrated shadow, unresolved traumas, or arrested emotional development, simply can't embody those positive, life giving aspects of the mother archetype consistently. Her own wounds become unconsciously transmitted to the child, shaping their burgeoning psyche in profound ways. These wounds can stem from various sources: her own experiences of neglect or abuse, societal pressures, personal neuroses, or unfulfilled desires. What defines her woundedness is her inability to provide the consistent, attuned, and secure emotional environment necessary for the child's healthy psychological development, often manifesting as emotional unavailability. A mother who is withdrawn, depressed, or consumed by her own problems may be physically present but emotionally absent, leaving the child feeling unseen and unheard. Controlling or possessive behavior. A mother who unconsciously projects her own unfulfilled desires or anxieties onto her child may stifle their autonomy, leading to a sense of being trapped or unable to self actualize. Criticality or devaluation. A mother who frequently criticizes, shames, or belittles her child can instill deep feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. Boundary violations. A mother who consistently oversteps personal boundaries can prevent the child from developing a healthy sense of self and personal space. Projection of shadow material. A mother may unconsciously project her own unacknowledged negative traits onto her child, leading the child to internalize these projections as their own flaws. Over identification with the child. A mother who lives vicariously through her child, blurring the lines between their separate identities, can hinder the child's ability to develop their unique personality. This early environment, permeated by the wounded mother's unintegrated shadow, forms the initial matrix of the child's psyche. It lays the groundwork for how the child perceives themselves, others, and the world. Carl Jung, a profound figure in the development of analytical psychology, offered a rich tapestry of concepts that illuminate the intricate workings of the human psyche. While Jung did not explicitly use the term wounded mother in the same way modern popular psychology might, his theories provide a robust framework for understanding the profound impact of the maternal figure, particularly when that figure carries unresolved psychological issues on the developing individual. This impact extends to the inner child, a concept widely recognized in Jungian informed therapies, and significantly shapes an individual's life choices and overall psychological well being. Overcoming these deep seated influences for Jung involves a process of individuation, a journey toward wholeness and self realization that can ultimately lead to a life of greater freedom and authenticity. To understand the wounded mother from a Jungian perspective, we must first grasp the concept of the mother archetype. Jung posited that archetypes are universal, primordial images and patterns of thought that reside in the collective unconscious, an inherited psychic system shared by all humanity. The mother archetype is one of the most fundamental and powerful embodying qualities of nurturing, fertility, support, security, boundless love, and creation. It is the source of all life, representing the unconscious ground of being from which consciousness emerges. However, like all archetypes, the mother archetype also possesses a shadow aspect. This shadow manifests as qualities of devouring, suffocating, abandoning, neglecting, or rejecting. When an individual's personal mother embodies these negative aspects, consciously or unconsciously, she becomes a wounded mother in the lived experience of the child. It's crucial to distinguish here between the archetypal pattern and the personal mother. The archetypal mother is a transpersonal image, while the personal mother is the specific individual who embodies, to varying degrees, aspects of this archetype for her child. The wounded mother, in a Jungian context, refers not necessarily to a mother who is intentionally malicious, but rather one who, due to her own unintegrated shadow, unresolved traumas, or arrested psychological development, cannot adequately fulfill the positive aspects of the mother archetype. Her own wounds become unconsciously transmitted to the child, shaping their burgeoning psyche in profound ways. These wounds can stem from various sources: her own experiences of neglect or abuse, societal pressures, personal neuroses, or unfulfilled desires. What defines her woundedness is her inability to provide the consistent, attuned, and secure emotional environment necessary for the child's healthy psychological development, often manifesting as emotional unavailability. A mother who is withdrawn, depressed, or consumed by her own problems may be physically present but emotionally absent, leaving the child feeling unseen and unheard. Controlling or possessive behavior. A mother who unconsciously projects her own unfulfilled desires or anxieties onto her child may stifle their autonomy, leading to a sense of being trapped or unable to self-actualize. Criticality or devaluation. A mother who frequently criticizes, shames, or belittles her child can instill deep feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. Boundary violations. A mother who consistently oversteps personal boundaries can prevent the child from developing a healthy sense of self and personal space. Projection of shadow material. A mother may unconsciously project her own unacknowledged negative traits onto her child, leading the child to internalize these projections as their own flaws. Over-identification with the child. A mother who lives vicariously through her child, blurring the lines between their separate identities, can hinder the child's ability to develop their unique personality. This early environment, permeated by the wounded mother's unintegrated shadow, forms the initial matrix of the child's psyche. It lays the groundwork for how the child perceives themselves, others, and the world. Jung did not explicitly use the term inner child as a distinct complex in the same way it's used in popular psychology today. However, his work on the puella eternus, eternal child, archetype, and the child archetype generally, along with the concept of complexes and the development of the ego, provides a robust theoretical basis for understanding the impact of early experiences on the enduring aspects of the psyche. The child archetype represents potential, future, new beginnings, innocence, vulnerability, and the capacity for growth and renewal. When the maternal environment is wounded, the healthy development of this inherent potential is significantly hampered. The inner child, in this context, refers to the vulnerable, feeling part of the self that retains the imprints of early experiences, particularly those related to primary caregivers. The wounded mother's influence is internalized and forms a complex within the child's psyche. A complex for Jung is an emotionally charged group of ideas or images that are repressed and operate unconsciously, exerting a powerful influence on behavior, thoughts, and feelings. The mother complex is one of the most fundamental and pervasive, as the mother is typically the child's first and most significant relationship. When the mother is wounded, the child's mother complex becomes negatively charged. This can manifest in various ways. Negative, affective tone. The complex will be associated with feelings of fear, anxiety, abandonment, shame, guilt, or inadequacy. Archetypal identification. The child may unconsciously identify with the victim aspect of the wounded mother or the perpetrator aspect, perpetuating patterns of suffering or control in their own lives. Ego development impairment. The ego, the center of consciousness, develops in relation to the primary caregivers. If the early maternal environment is unstable or pathological, the ego may develop defensively, leading to false self. The child may construct a false self to gain approval or avoid further pain, suppressing their authentic self. Weak boundaries. Difficulty in establishing healthy personal boundaries, leading to codependency or being easily overwhelmed by others' needs. Low self-esteem, chronic feelings of unworthiness stemming from internalized criticisms or perceived lack of love. Inability to trust, difficulty forming secure attachments and trusting others due to early experiences of betrayal or inconsistency. Anxiety and depression, persistent states of emotional distress rooted in unmet needs and unresolved conflicts. The inner child thus becomes a repository of these early wounds, carrying the emotional residue of the personal mother's unintegrated shadow. This wounded inner child, whether it manifests as a fearful, angry, shamed, or abandoned part of the self, continues to influence the adult's perceptions, emotions, and behaviors, often operating outside conscious awareness. The patterns established in infancy and childhood become deeply ingrained, forming the bedrock of one's psychological landscape. Life choices as echoes of the past, the unconscious directing the conscious. The enduring presence of the wounded inner child, operating through the negatively charged mother complex, profoundly shapes an individual's life choices. These choices are often not conscious, deliberate decisions, but rather unconscious reactions, driven by the need to replicate familiar patterns. Humans are drawn to what is known, even if it is painful. Individuals may unconsciously seek out relationships, jobs, or situations that mirror the dynamics of their early family environment, attempting to master the past or achieve a different outcome. Choosing partners. A common manifestation is choosing partners who embody aspects of the wounded mother, e.g., emotionally unavailable, critical, controlling, or conversely, the opposite extreme in a reactive attempt to avoid past pain, only to find new forms of dysfunction. Career choices. Some may gravitate towards careers that offer a sense of control or external validation to compensate for early feelings of powerlessness or inadequacy. Others may shy away from leadership roles if they associate power with the negative aspects of their mother. Seek unmet needs. The wounded inner child constantly yearns for the love, acceptance, and security it lacked. This can lead to people pleasing, an excessive need for external validation and approval, sacrificing one's own needs and desires to avoid perceived rejection. Codependency. forming relationships where one sense of self is intertwined with another's, often sacrificing personal autonomy to maintain the connection, much like a child might cling to an unreliable parent. Addictive behaviors, seeking solace or escape in substances, activities, or relationships to numb the pain of the wounded inner child or fill the void left by unmet emotional needs. Defend against perceived threats. The world is experienced through the lens of early trauma. This can lead to avoidance, shying away from intimacy, commitment, or vulnerability to protect against potential abandonment or hurt. Perfectionism, a relentless pursuit of flawlessness to avoid criticism or rejection, often stemming from an internalized critical parental voice. Difficulty with authority, rebellion or extreme deference towards authority figures, depending on how the original parental authority was experienced. Repetition compulsion, a Freudian concept adopted by Jungians, where individuals unconsciously repeat traumatic experiences in an attempt to gain mastery over them or bring them to conscious awareness. This can manifest as repeatedly entering toxic relationships or self-sabotaging success. Project internal conflicts. Unacknowledged aspects of the mother complex can be projected onto others. For example, a person with a devouring mother complex might perceive all nurturing figures as potentially suffocating, or an individual with an abandoning mother complex might constantly fear abandonment in their relationships, even when there is no objective threat. This projection distorts reality and creates unnecessary conflict. Overcoming the wounded mother, the path to individuation and freedom. Overcoming the impact of the wounded mother is not about blaming or severing ties, but rather about a profound inner transformation. It is a journey of psychological healing and growth, leading towards individuation, the central concept in Jungian psychology. Individuation is the process by which an individual becomes a whole, differentiated, and unique self, integrating conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. It involves confronting the shadow, integrating complexes, and ultimately aligning with the self, the regulating center of the total psyche. The path to overcoming the wounded mother and living a life of freedom involves several key Jungian informed steps. Becoming conscious, unveiling. The unconscious dynamics is the first step. The first and most crucial step is to bring the unconscious dynamics into conscious awareness. This involves self-reflection and introspection, paying close attention to one's emotional reactions, recurring patterns of behavior, and persistent thoughts. Why do I react this way? What fears or desires are driving my choices? Dream analysis. Jung believed dreams are messages from the unconscious, offering insights into complexes, archetypal influences, and the overall state of the psyche. Analyzing dreams, especially recurring themes, can reveal the hidden impact of the mother complex. Dreams may depict the wounded mother directly or through symbolic figures, offering clues about the nature of the wound. Active imagination, a technique where one consciously engages with images, figures, or emotions from the unconscious, allowing them to unfold and interact. This can provide direct access to the wounded inner child and the dynamics of the mother complex, allowing for dialogue and integration. Therapy with a Jungian analyst. Working with a trained Jungian analyst is invaluable. The analyst helps the individual navigate the complexities of the unconscious, interpret symbolic material, and provide a safe container for the exploration of painful early experiences. The therapeutic relationship itself can become a corrective experience, providing the mirroring and attunement that was lacking in childhood. Confronting the mother complex and the shadow. This is often the most challenging but necessary part of the process. It involves acknowledging the wound, recognizing and accepting the reality of the emotional wound inflicted by the personal mother without blame but with understanding. This involves grieving the loss of the good enough mother one may have wished for, separating from the archetype, distinguishing between the personal mother and the archetypal mother. The goal is to free oneself from being defined by the personal mother's limitations and to establish a healthier relationship with the nurturing and creative aspects of the mother archetype within one's own psyche. Integrating the shadow of the mother archetype, recognizing how the negative aspects of the mother archetype, devouring, suffocating, etc., might have been internalized or are being projected onto others. This also involves acknowledging one's own shadow, including any internalized negative patterns learned from the mother. Disidentification from the wounded inner child. Recognizing that while the wounded inner child carries the pain, it is not the entirety of one's being. The goal is not to erase the inner child, but to acknowledge its needs, offer it compassion, and integrate its experiences without allowing it to dictate present behavior. This involves a process of reparenting the inner child, providing the love, validation, and security it lacked. Building ego strength and autonomy. As unconscious material becomes conscious, the ego strengthens. This involves establishing healthy boundaries, learning to say no, protect one's energy, and define personal space, both physically and emotionally. Developing self-compassion, treating oneself with the same kindness and understanding one would offer a beloved child. This counters the internalized criticism and self-blame. Cultivating self-reliance, trusting one's own intuition, making decisions based on internal values rather than external approval, and taking responsibility for one's own well-being. Differentiating from collective norms, Jung emphasized the importance of distinguishing oneself from the collective unconscious and societal expectations that may not align with one's authentic self. This is crucial for breaking free from inherited patterns. Activating the father archetype and other archetypes, balancing the psyche. While the focus is on the mother, Jungian psychology understands the psyche as a system of compensating forces. The father archetype, representing order, structure, logic, authority, protection, and the spirit, often plays a crucial role in balancing the influence of the mother. If the mother principle was overwhelming or chaotic, activating the positive aspects of the father archetype can provide grounding, direction, and a sense of internal authority. This might involve seeking out mentors who embody positive fatherly qualities, developing one's own sense of inner discipline and structure, engaging with intellectual pursuits or creative endeavors that require focus and clarity. Furthermore, integrating other archetypes, e.g., the hero, the sage, the lover, can enrich the personality and provide alternative sources of identification and strength, moving beyond the confines of the mother complex. Connecting with the self. The ultimate goal of individuation is to connect with the self, the unifying center of the psyche, the totality of conscious and unconscious. The self provides guidance, meaning, and a sense of wholeness. When an individual is aligned with the self, they are less driven by complexes and more by their authentic inner compass. This connection fosters meaning and purpose, a deeper understanding of one's unique life path and contribution. Inner peace and wholeness, a sense of integration and harmony within the psyche. Authenticity, living in alignment with one's true nature rather than a persona or the expectations of others. Spontaneity and creativity, a renewed access to one's innate creative potential. This process is not linear but cyclical, often involving revisiting old wounds and continually refining one's understanding. It requires courage, perseverance, and a willingness to confront painful truths. These unconscious drives, stemming from the unintegrated mother complex and the wounded inner child, can lead to a life of limited choices, repeating cycles of dissatisfaction and a persistent feeling of being unfulfilled or not truly free. The individual may feel stuck, unaware that the chains are not external but forged in the crucible of early experiences. The freedom they seek is often elusive because the unconscious dictates their path. Her own wounds, often unconsciously, seep into the child's world, shaping their developing mind. These wounds can stem from so many places: her own history of neglect, societal pressures, personal anxieties, or unfulfilled desires. What makes her wounded in this context is her inability to provide that consistent, attuned, and secure emotional environment a child needs to flourish. You might see it show up as emotional unavailability, where she's physically there but perhaps consumed by her own problems, leaving the child feeling unseen. Or it could be controlling or possessive behaviors, where she might unconsciously project her unfulfilled dreams onto the child, stifling their burgeoning sense of self. Constant criticism or devaluation can deeply implant feelings of worthlessness, while blurred boundaries, regularly overstepping personal limits, can prevent the child from developing a healthy sense of their own space and self. Sometimes she might unconsciously dump her own unacknowledged negative traits onto her child, who then internalizes them as their own flaws. And in other cases, there might be an over identification where she lives vicariously through the child, making it hard for the child to find their own unique identity. This early environment, infused with the wounded mother's unintegrated shadow, becomes the very first foundation of the child's psyche. It molds how they'll see themselves, others, and the entire world. Jung himself didn't use the exact term inner child in the way it's often discussed today, but his work on the child archetype and the concept of complexes provides a perfect framework for understanding it. The child archetype represents pure potential, new beginnings, innocence, and our capacity for growth. When the maternal environment is wounded, the healthy blossoming of this inherent potential is significantly hindered. So, when we talk about the inner child, we're referring to that vulnerable, feeling part of your adult self that still carries the deep imprints of your earliest experiences, especially those with your primary caregivers. The wounded mother's influence gets internalized, forming a complex within your psyche. Jung defined a complex as an emotionally charged cluster of ideas or images that are often repressed but operate unconsciously, powerfully influencing your behavior, thoughts, and feelings. The mother complex is one of the most fundamental because for most of us, our mother is our very first and most significant relationship. When that maternal experience is wounded, your mother complex becomes negatively charged. This can show up in so many ways. A negative emotional core where the complex is associated with feelings like fear, anxiety, abandonment, shame, or deep inadequacy. You might find an unconscious identification where you strangely identify with the victim aspect of your wounded mother, or even, in some cases, the perpetrator aspect, perpetuating patterns of suffering or control in your own life. And there's a significant impact on your ego, your conscious sense of self, which develops in relation to your early caregivers. If that early maternal environment was unstable or unhealthy, your ego might develop defensively. This can lead to creating a false self, a facade to gain approval or avoid further pain, burying your authentic self. It can also manifest as weak boundaries, making it hard to say no, leading to codependency, or feeling overwhelmed by others' needs. There can be persistent low self esteem, chronic feelings of unworthiness, constantly hearing an internalized critical voice. You might struggle with difficulty trusting, finding it hard to form secure attachments because early experiences were inconsistent or felt like a betrayal. And often, there can be persistent anxiety or depression, emotional distress rooted in those unmet needs and unresolved early conflicts. So, your inner child becomes a silent keeper of these early wounds, carrying the emotional residue of your personal mother's unintegrated shadow. This wounded part of you, whether it manifests as fear, anger, shame, or abandonment, continues to influence your adult perceptions, emotions, and behaviors, often completely outside your conscious awareness. Those patterns, laid down in infancy, become the deep bedrock of your psychological landscape. The enduring presence of that wounded inner child, operating through a negatively charged mother complex, profoundly shapes your life choices. And here's the kicker: these choices aren't always conscious, deliberate decisions. They're often unconscious reactions, driven by a deep seated need to replicate familiar patterns. We're strangely drawn to what's known, even if it's painful. You might unconsciously seek out relationships, jobs, or situations that mirror the dynamics of your early family, almost as if trying to master the past or achieve a different outcome. A classic example is consistently choosing partners who embody aspects of your wounded mother. Perhaps they're emotionally unavailable, critical, or controlling. Or conversely, you might pick the exact opposite out of reaction, only to find new forms of dysfunction. Some people gravitate towards careers that offer immense control or external validation to compensate for early feelings of powerlessness. Others might shy away from leadership if they associate power with the negative aspects of their mother. This wounded inner child constantly yearns for the love, acceptance, and security it lacked. This can manifest as people pleasing, an excessive need for external validation, sacrificing your own needs to avoid perceived rejection. It can also lead to codependency, forming relationships where your sense of self is blurred with another's, sacrificing autonomy to maintain the connection, much like a child might cling to an unreliable parent. Or you might find yourself resorting to addictive behaviors, seeking solace or escape in substances, activities, or relationships to numb the pain or fill that deep void. You experience the world through the lens of your early trauma. This can lead to avoidance, shying away from intimacy or vulnerability to protect against potential abandonment or hurt. It can foster perfectionism, a relentless pursuit of flawlessness, often fueled by an internalized critical voice. You might experience difficulty with authority, either extreme rebellion or extreme deference, depending on how you experienced parental authority. And there's often a repetition compulsion where you unconsciously repeat painful experiences, almost as if trying to gain mastery over them or bring them to light. This can mean repeatedly entering toxic relationships or self sabotaging success. Those unacknowledged aspects of your mother complex can be projected onto others. For example, if you had a devouring mother, you might perceive all nurturing figures as potentially suffocating. Or if you experienced abandonment, you might constantly fear it in relationships, even when there's no real threat. These projections distort reality and create unnecessary conflict. These unconscious drives, born from that unintegrated mother complex and wounded inner child, can trap you in a life of limited choices, endless cycles of dissatisfaction, and a persistent feeling of being unfulfilled or not truly free. You might feel stuck, unaware that the chains aren't external, but forged in the crucible of your earliest experiences. The freedom you seek remains elusive because your unconscious is still dictating your path. Now, for the hopeful part. Overcoming the impact of the wounded mother isn't about blame or cutting ties. It's about a profound inner transformation. It's a journey of psychological healing and growth leading towards individuation, Jung's core concept. Individuation is the process of becoming a whole, unique, and differentiated self, integrating both your conscious and unconscious aspects. It means confronting your shadow, integrating your complexes, and ultimately aligning with yourself, that guiding, regulating center of your entire psyche. This path to overcoming the wounded mother and living a life of freedom involves several key steps inspired by Jungian wisdom. The first and most vital step is to bring these unconscious patterns into your conscious awareness. This means deep self-reflection, paying close attention to your emotional reactions, those recurring patterns in your behavior, and your persistent thoughts. Ask yourself, why do I react this way? What fears or desires are really driving my choices? Dream analysis is also incredibly powerful. Jung believed dreams are direct messages from your unconscious, offering insights into your complexes and the state of your psyche. Analyzing your dreams, especially recurring themes, can reveal the hidden impact of your mother complex. Active imagination is a technique where you consciously engage with images, figures, or emotions that emerge from your unconscious. Allowing them to unfold and interact can give you direct access to your wounded inner child and the dynamics of your mother complex, opening a dialogue for healing. And working with a Jungian analyst can be invaluable. A trained analyst can help you navigate the complexities of your unconscious, interpret symbolic material, and provide a safe space to explore those painful early experiences. The therapeutic relationship itself can become a corrective experience, offering the mirroring and attunement you might have lacked in childhood. This is often the most challenging, but absolutely necessary, part of the process, confronting the mother complex and your shadow. It means acknowledging the wound, recognizing and accepting the reality of the emotional wound inflicted by your personal mother. This isn't about blame, but about understanding. It involves grieving the loss of the good enough mother you might have wished for. You then need to separate from the archetype, distinguishing between your personal mother and the universal mother archetype. The goal is to free yourself from being defined by your personal mother's limitations and to build a healthier relationship with the nurturing, creative aspects of the mother archetype within your own psyche. It's also vital to integrate the mother archetype's shadow, recognizing how those negative aspects, the devouring, the suffocating, might have been internalized or are being projected onto others. This also means acknowledging your own shadow, including any negative patterns you learned from your mother. And finally, you work to disidentify from the wounded inner child, recognizing that while your wounded inner child carries the pain, it isn't the whole of who you are. The goal isn't to erase this part, but to acknowledge its needs, offer it compassion, and integrate its experiences without letting it dictate your present behavior. Think of it as reparenting that inner child, giving it the love, validation, and security it always craved. As you bring unconscious material to light, your ego, your conscious self, grows stronger. This involves setting healthy boundaries, learning to say no, protecting your energy, and defining your personal space, both physically and emotionally. It means cultivating self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd offer a beloved child. This directly counters internalized criticism and self-blame. You'll work on developing self-reliance, learning to trust your own intuition, making decisions based on your inner values rather than external approval, and taking responsibility for your own well being. And Jung stressed the importance of differentiating from the crowd, distinguishing yourself from collective expectations and societal norms that might not align with your authentic self. This is vital for breaking free from inherited patterns. While we focused on the mother, Jungian psychology understands the psyche as a system of balancing forces. The father archetype, representing order, structure, logic, authority, protection, and the spirit, plays a crucial role in balancing the mother's influence. If the mother principle felt overwhelming or chaotic in your life, activating the positive aspects of the father archetype can provide grounding, direction, and a strong sense of inner authority. This might mean seeking out mentors who embody positive fatherly qualities, developing your own sense of inner discipline and structure, or engaging with intellectual pursuits or creative endeavors that require focus and clarity. And beyond the mother and father, integrating other archetypes like the hero, the sage, the lover can enrich your personality, offering new sources of identification and strength, helping you move beyond the confines of that mother complex. The ultimate goal of individuation is to connect with yourself, that unifying center of your entire psyche, the totality of your conscious and unconscious being. When you align with yourself, you're less driven by complexes and more by your authentic inner compass. This connection fosters meaning and purpose, a deeper understanding of your unique life path and what you're here to contribute. It brings inner peace and wholeness, a profound sense of integration and harmony within your psyche. It leads to authenticity, living truly in alignment with who you are rather than a mask or the expectations of others. And it unlocks spontaneity and creativity, a renewed access to your innate creative potential. This entire process isn't a straight line, it's often cyclical, involving revisiting old wounds and continually refining your understanding. It takes courage, perseverance, and a deep willingness to confront painful truths. Carl Jung's insights into the profound influence of your earliest maternal relationship, especially when your mother carries her own unintegrated wounds, offer a powerful lens for understanding human suffering and the pathways to healing. The impact on your inner child, the enduring emotional residue of these experiences, truly shapes your life choices in often unconscious and limiting ways. But Jung's psychology is ultimately a beacon of hope and transformation. By embarking on this courageous journey of individuation, by bringing unconscious dynamics into your awareness, by confronting your mother complex, integrating your shadow, strengthening your ego, and ultimately connecting with your deepest self, you can gradually untangle yourself from the chains of the past. This process of psychological liberation allows your authentic self to truly emerge. It leads you to a life characterized not by reaction or endless repetition, but by conscious choice, genuine freedom, and the full realization of your unique potential. It's a journey from being defined by past wounds to becoming the conscious creator of your own destiny, a life lived with greater wholeness, purpose, and profound inner freedom.